This morning's theme, which is being talked about by all the creative mornings around the world this Friday and other Fridays this month, is pattern. This is chosen by one of our chapters in India. I'm going to mispronounce the name probably if I try, but if you want to find out more information about that chapter or the illustrator or anything else, you can go to Creative Mornings blog. And when we think about patterns and creativity, there's probably a lot of things popping up into your mind right away. And we're really excited to welcome our friend Hayley to the stage this morning. I made this joke to her earlier that I was trying to decide what to call her or what titles to put up here. There's way too many things because she does a lot of different things in the world of entrepreneurship, creativity, and the Twin Cities and beyond. So let's give Hayley a big round of applause and welcome her to the Creative Mornings stage.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Give me 1 second here. So, this is a little scary. I'm looking out and there are a lot of you here. It's a lot, and I'm equal parts thrilled about that. I was very nervous about speaking to an empty room and also very terrified that I'm not in fact speaking to an empty room. So, I have my emotional support coffee cup to have it. Okay, so pattern. When I think about the word pattern, it brings a sense of safety because it denotes repetition, consistency, duplication, and I think about all of the ways that shows up in my life, and there's a certain sense of security with a pattern, right? You know what to expect. But what if you're a person that sees a pattern and thinks, that's not for me, I don't want to go with the pattern, I want to do something completely different. I feel like that's where I kind of sit in the world of things, is I often look at my life and think, this is the way things are going, and I want to try something over here instead. And I probably think that many of you in this room are like that as well. The word entrepreneur comes from the French word entreprendre. Excuse my pronunciation, it's probably not the best. Which literally translates as the undertaker, the person who undertakes the things. But it's derived from two Latin words, entre, which means to swim out, and prendes, which means to grasp hold of. And I feel like that visual of swimming out from the crowd, swimming out from the pack on your own, grasping a hold of something, it conjures this image for me of trying to stay afloat, maybe swimming upstream. And I often think that entrepreneurship is not a left or right-brained activity, it's a whole-brained activity. And I think a lot of the creatives in this room probably feel that when you're making the art, and you're the marketing person and the social media manager and the accountant and the invoicing person. It's a full body pursuit. And it sometimes feels like drowning, to be honest. It really does. But I think that it's what I'm built for. I think it's the way my brain works. I think it's what I knew from a really young age that I was meant to do. And I think that it's probably what a lot of you in this room are built for as well. I also think that there are a lot of you in this room, my suspicion is that there are a lot of you in this room that are maybe on the verge of swimming out and grasping hold of something, but you maybe feel scared to make that jump. It's very daunting to jump into the unknown, there's lots of metaphors, walking off a cliff, swimming out to sea, whatever you want to call it. So maybe you're stuck in a job that makes you miserable, or a relationship that is unfulfilling, a friendship. But sometimes that discomfort is a low-level hum, and it's not enough to really force your hand into breaking it off and making the next move. It's a lot to upend your life, and that can be very daunting and scary. And we're generally not encouraged to be risk takers, right? A lot of the systems that we grow up in are designed for compliance rather than creativity. And so it can be scary, but I think that creativity is what breeds innovation, and innovation is what moves us forward. any great leap for us as a society or as a human species is born out of creativity. I've always known since I was a child that I was meant to do something big. And I didn't always know what that was, but I just had this sense that I was going to do something important. And I haven't asked many other people if they also felt that, so maybe everyone in this room grew up feeling like that, I don't know. But I always had this feeling that I was maybe different in that way, and had this sense that there was something bigger than me and where I was born and the life that I had. And I also knew early on that I wanted my own business, but I didn't know for a really long time what that would be. So I remember thinking as a teenager how cool it would be and how I just didn't want to be ruled by anyone else. And now I'm totally ungovernable, so it's I couldn't have a day job now if I tried, I don't think. But I was very creative as a child, and my mom, I was raised by a single mom, and she really nurtured creativity in both me and my sister. And she found a lot of opportunities. She was very proactive in seeking out creative opportunities for us. So we were doing pottery and art classes at community education, and all of those things were done through scholarships for low-income families. And I often think if she hadn't taken those steps to really nurture that creativity in our family, would I be standing here right now? I think about all the steps that brought me to this place, right here this morning. And I don't think I would, honestly. I think that nurturing people's talents and fostering and pouring into children in specifically can take them to places that, you know, we just never would have the chance to reach our full potential without that kind of investment. So artistic talent runs on my mum's side of the family, and I've always been just immersed in that until I went to art school, and then it just crushed all of the creativity out of me and the confidence. So yeah, I always thought of myself as an artist until I was 18, and then I was like, oh, nope, don't want to do that anymore. That's enough of that for me. So, and I've always had this sense of urgency around my own life. I very much have always felt that even if I live to be an old woman, that is not enough. It's too short. Life is too short for everything that I want to do. And that it puts a lot of pressure on you when you're like 6 and you're thinking about dying later. But you know, that's kind of the things that were going through my mind at that age. And now that I'm 41, I think the way that manifests for me is just, every birthday, I say to myself, what a privilege to age. In a society where aging is vilified, and especially if you're a woman, right? Oh, don't age, do all these things to make sure you don't age. And I think, gosh, we should all be so lucky as to age, to just get another year out of this, right?
Yeah, you're here.
Thank you. And so I try to be really appreciative of that, and how I kind of put that into action in my life is thinking about when I'm on my deathbed, again, circling back to this, a little light Friday morning chit chat about dying. What are the things that I would look back on and think, oh, I never gave that a shot, you know, or I missed the opportunity to do this, or I was too scared to even try, right? That has always felt like my biggest fear is, what if I look back and I think, oh, I wish I had done that when I was 20, and I didn't. So it's a big factor in how I make decisions. Just this idea of you never want to regret not doing something. It's always better to to take that jump, right? And jump into the unknown. And the question that I ask myself when I'm considering this a next big leap into something that I haven't done before is, what's the worst that can happen? What is the worst? And so, like, when I think about quitting a job, first of all, I love to quit a thing. Quitting is very underrated. People are like, oh, don't quit your job. I'm like, quit your job, like, flip the desk, let's go. Go, we'll figure it out later, it'll be fine. And I think people are so, again, we're bred and raised to be so cautious. And so I have to have every step figured out, and I have to know exactly how I'm going to pay my bills, and I have to know where I'm going to get my health benefits, and I have to know, and that is paralyzing. It's so hard to make a jump when we're just barraged with the what ifs of everything that could go wrong. And so what I try to do is, when I ask myself what's the worst that can happen, the next question that I'll ask myself is, and then what? Because often when you ask yourself, and then what, you find a solution to the worst that can happen, right? Well, I don't want to quit my job because I don't know how I'll pay my bills. And then what? Well, if I'm trying this creative pursuit and it doesn't work out, I can go work at McDonald's. And then what? Well, McDonald's has actually really good pay if you didn't know. So it's not the worst thing that could happen to you. So when you keep asking yourself, and then what? You soon run out of excuses to not try the thing that you want to try. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should just be 100% reckless and quit your job, go and live on a yacht, whatever. Like, 100% recklessness is not advised, but like 85% recklessness, I'd say that's like the exact right quotient of just be a little like free and easy with how you see what the potential of your life could be. Because I want to say that paralysis in just the overwhelm of decision making, you often will find that you think, I have to have everything figured out, or my new venture has to be perfect, or this piece of art has to be exactly right before I let anyone see it. But usually, if you just launch, you'll figure it out along the way, right? And that's the best thing that you can do, is to just jump off like that. All of the biggest gains that I have made in my life have been when I've just taken this shot in the dark and gone for it. So what does the process look like of discerning what is a good decision and what is a reckless decision? That would be helpful knowledge, right? So perhaps it's, for some of you, it might be a very logical process of I run the numbers, or I write a pros and cons list, and I'm analyzing and thinking about these things. And those things are definitely valuable. I certainly do those things. But for me, it is also more of an intuition. It's a feeling in my whole body. And I often find that my body will tell me things that my brain is not yet ready to hear about various things, people that I'm around, projects that I'm working on, things like that. It's a feeling of your nervous system reacting. And you can apply this to all different things in your life. And I do believe that everybody has this internal radar. And you may not think that you do. You're like, what is she talking about? Feel it in your body? I don't know. Like, sounds hippy-dippy. I get it. But like an example of this that maybe everyone can relate to is your phone rings and you pick it up and you look at the screen and you either have that, ooh, it's so-and-so, or you have the, ooh, and you have to pick it up, and maybe it's like the picky client that you have, or it's the difficult family member. But you know that feeling because it's a full body feeling when you have that reaction. It's also the thing of when you have a project that you're working on and you really don't want to be working on it. It's not what excites you. Maybe it's taxes. Like taxes is a great example. Like that deadline is not moving, and yet I will find, there's suddenly a dishwasher that needs loading, or there's laundry to fold, or there's anything looks more appealing than doing that thing. And I'm not saying avoid your taxes because it doesn't feel good. Like, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that all feelings in that way are your nervous system trying to communicate to you. And if you can figure out how to listen to those feelings, it will guide you to the most fulfilling work and relationships of your life. And when I say work in this context, I don't mean a paid 9-to-5 necessarily. I mean whatever your life's purpose is. So whether it's your creative pursuits or your, maybe it is your job, your actual work. I spent a lot of time in my 20s and 30s trying to turn the volume down on those senses. I would always dismiss things and think, oh, it'll be fine, it will work out. Or this person that you feel uneasy around, or this person you don't really like working with, you'll get over it. And I used to gaslight myself into thinking I was wrong. But I almost never was. And as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that the more I follow those feelings, the more I'm in alignment with my purpose, and the more things fall into place for me. And now the timing between when I feel those initial thoughts of, I don't know about this, or yes, this is the thing to pursue, the reaction time is shorter and shorter the older that I get, because it's like a muscle that needs to be trained, and you need to listen to it and you need to act on it. Now that I'm a parent, it's something that I'm actively working to teach my own kids to try to listen to, because I think it's one of the best ways that as a young person you can keep yourself safe and make good decisions is if you have the confidence to act when you know that something isn't right, or you know you're around people that aren't good for you. You know you're in a situation you shouldn't be in. So the first big jump I made was when I was 25. And I went backpacking solo around the world.
Oh, nice.
Launching yourself out of a plane above a lake is certainly a jump. Certainly a jump. It's a whole thing. This trip was one that I knew that I had to do. I was thinking about it after university for a long time, and I knew that in the course of my life, I couldn't not do this thing. And I also knew that if I waited for somebody else to be ready to come on the trip with me, I'd never go. I had a boyfriend at the time, and I asked him, hey, I'm gonna go backpacking around the world for 8 months. Do you wanna go? And he was like, no. And it wasn't a money issue or anything like that. Like he could afford to go. He just had no interest in seeing the world. And I thought, you're not my person. So I knew that I was at this rare point in my life where I didn't have any obligations. I didn't have a mortgage or kids or a husband or any of those things that really anchor you. And I was early in my career, and it was one of the times that I could see, it felt like a 10,000 foot view of like, oh, this is the window. It's now or never. You can't just do this at other points in your life. And it was a dream that I had, and I just really wanted to make it happen. So bear in mind, at this point, I had never actually taken a flight on my own. I'd been on family vacations, and I had done a couple trips with my then boyfriend, but had never actually been to an airport alone and looked for my flights, you know. And so when I told my mum that I was going, she had some concerns. The first and primary concern was, what if somebody smuggles drugs in your backpack? And I was like, well, you know, what's the worst that can happen? Like, and then you'll be on a beach in Thailand with a case full of, no, anyway. So, it certainly wasn't my most pressing concern. So the trip went ahead, no drug smuggling. And the Cliff Notes version of what happened over those 8 months is that I grew in leaps and bounds as a human being. So it completely changed my outlook on everything. I saw things that I had never seen before. I put myself in positions where I was way out of my comfort zone. I hiked a fucking mountain. Like I'd never even seen a mountain before this trip, and then I'm like on top of one. It's crazy. And I experienced things that I'd never done before. And actually, the following year, I ended up marrying the tour guide from the US leg of my trip. So that's how I'm here. That's the Cliff Notes version of how I ended up here. So moving to Minneapolis was my next big jump. I moved here bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with a very light jacket and a pair of Ugg boots in November of 2008. No idea what Minnesota winter was or what I was in for. And we had this discussion of Minneapolis or London, and November of 2008, we had to make this decision actually back in April of that year, and we thought, well, Minneapolis feels like a better place to, get started. It's cheaper, cost of living, all these things. And then I moved here in November, and the economy just, absolutely tanked. So the transition of moving from London to Minneapolis was very hard for those reasons, but also I didn't know anybody here apart from my fiance at the time, and I couldn't work. So when you move here as an immigrant, you know, I know a lot of people have this idea that you just show up and you're, you know, whatever, doing all the things. You can't work for about 6 months. And so Minnesota winter with none of my own money, no ability to make friends or go out, you know, and where you usually meet people through work, I didn't have that option. So I actually cleaned my brother-in-law's house for cash in hand, and let me tell you, cleaning the house of a bachelor is it's not for the faint of heart. So 2 weeks after I moved here, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at home. And the way that the Department of Homeland Security works, if you're trying to move to the US, is you spend about a year, I think it's actually more like 2 years now after you apply for your fiancé visa, waiting to come into the country. And they won't let you, right? So you're waiting, doing this long distance thing. And then when you get here, they won't let you leave. So my dad was literally dying at home, and I just got here. I got this thing I'd been waiting for a year, arrived, and then I was like, no, I want to go back now. And they're like, you can't, because then you've abandoned your visa. So I did get to see my dad very briefly before he passed, but it was a rough year. And that transition of just leaving my family, my friends, my career, everything that I knew, and immersing myself in this new place was a big leap of faith. And let me tell you, I questioned it every day. I spent a lot of time in bed, laying in bed all day just thinking, what have I done? I think it was depression, but there's a lot of questioning going on. So I lived here for a few years, and one of the biggest things that I missed at home was street markets, which is kind of a random thing to miss. But it was just that social and community piece of culture from the UK, and you know, it's obviously a big thing across Europe, that didn't really exist here at that time. This was like 2014. And so here at that time there were farmers markets as a weekly market option, and then there were annual craft fairs and like once a year events. But there wasn't really any weekly outlet for artists and makers, which I thought was weird because we have such an abundance of creatives and, you know, the #1 arts district in the country, but there wasn't an outlet like that. So I grew up in Greenwich. That's not my house. That's not my house. That's the Park Rangers house, which if any of you are Netflix fans, you might recognize as Bridgerton House, with a little help from some CGI wisteria there. So Greenwich is 5 miles from the center of London. It became a settlement in about 900 AD and Anglo-Saxon times, so it's been there a little while. And it's right on the banks of the River Thames, so it was a port for all kinds of goods coming into England. And so it's always had this thriving market scene. And there was a 1,000-year royal charter, which I had just learned about writing this talk, a 1,000-year royal charter to designate this space as a permanent location for the next 1,000 years for Greenwich Market in 1737. So there has been this permanent market on this site since 1737. And so this is what I used to do on weekends as a kid and as a teenager is, you know, when you're in that awkward window of you're not old enough to be doing adult things, but you're too old for like certain kid things. So there's this awkward tween years, and the market was a great place to hang out during that period. So when it first opened, there were about 60 stallholders, and I learned that more than half of them were butchers. There was one greengrocer, which is a produce stand. I don't know if you have that expression here, greengrocer. One baker and one hat maker. And I thought, that's all the essentials right there. So over the years, the market developed, and now these days you can find everything from crafts, antiques, global foods, handmade items. And so this was my experience growing up, was just seeing this really rich street culture scene. And it was like so open to everyone. And it's actually very common for people in the UK to start off, if you have like a handmade business or you're a clothing designer, it's very common to start at a market like this, test your products without the obligation of a storefront, and then perhaps expand your business from there. So I really missed that when I was here. And so the next big jump that I made was patiently waiting for somebody else to launch something like that. And then when they didn't, I thought, well, maybe I should just do that. So I launched Minneapolis Craft Market in 2015. We host designers and makers of the North. And at that time in 2015, I was working a full-time day job and I had a 1-year-old baby. And it was intended to be like a little side hobby, you know, just something to, like didn't have enough on my plate or whatever. And it was very quickly adopted by the community. We, I think the art scene here was really just like waiting for something like that. And the creatives that we work with, just really adopted it. And it became a very regular thing. We were actually hosting markets pretty much every weekend, year round. And so what my life looked like at that point was full-time day job during the day, on my laptop trying to launch this new business in the evenings, working at the markets every weekend, and then trying to be a parent to a 1-year-old and a wife, right? And I felt like I wasn't really doing anything well. So in 2017, I had a second baby, and it felt like the time that I was spending each week on my day job, if I could take this block of 40 hours and apply it to my business, I had this feeling that everything was at this level, right? I was just spread so thin, and I felt like I wasn't doing anything well, and I felt like if I could take that 40 hours, put it into the business, I could take it to here. And that's what happened. And so having the courage to jump in with both feet in that way, and by that point we had not universal healthcare, Obamacare, and so it was an option to not have your healthcare tied to your job, and that was a big part of what enabled me to make that leap when I had previously been tied to a job through my benefits. So in 2018, we added the vintage market, and we host those about once a month at venues across the Twin Cities. We now work with more than 500 vintage vendors, which is insane to me how quickly that community has grown. It's really gone from strength to strength. In between the two markets, we host around 120 markets per year. We work with 2,000 artists now and 500 vintage vendors. And 2019 was my best year yet. I was on track. Things were going great. I was like, 2020, here I come. I had big plans. And so one of those plans was to develop an online marketplace for the business. And so what I was envisioning was something like a hyper-local version of Etsy. So sellers would have their own storefront hosted within our website, and the plan was to spend a full year researching the technology, building out the infrastructure, and then finally launching in this solid marketing plan. I began working on the plan in March of 2020. I had my first day of orientation at Luna Startups, and then day 2 they said, we're going to move to virtual. I was like, cool. But we'll be back like next week or like something like that. Yeah. And so at that point, both of my businesses closed overnight. And my husband at that time was, he's now my ex-husband, was unemployed. And so I was the sole income for our household of 4, and both my businesses shuttered overnight. So I just took some deep breaths. And when I tell you the grief that is attached to losing the work that you have done for the past 5 years, I can only imagine it's like having an art gallery full of your work and the whole thing going up in flames. With the pressure of being the only person who can make something happen for your whole family was very suffocating to me. But I think the thing about entrepreneurs is that when our back is against the wall, typically, that might be when our best work comes out. And so this online marketplace that I had planned to develop over the course of a year, we launched in 6 weeks instead. It's fine, everything's fine. So both of my in-person businesses were closed. I had this online thing, but it certainly wasn't going to pay all of the bills. And so I took on some contract work for my friend Houston White. He wanted to host some virtual conversations throughout the pandemic, and so I helped him with those. And we just developed this friendship and realized that we really liked working together. He has a barbershop in North Minneapolis that he's had for about 15 years. And he called me one day and said, hey, I have this new little project I want to start. It's a coffee company in partnership with Dogwood Coffee. And the goal of that coffee company is to bring more diversity into specialty coffee, which is a kind of a higher end subset of coffee. And so we got to work, and we launched on Black Friday of 2020 with a crowdfunding campaign that I helped produce. And our goal with the crowdfunding campaign was if we can get $50,000 in $10, $20 donations, the community supports it enough to make it happen. And so I often think that one blessing of the pandemic is that there weren't many, but it allowed me to have the space to step back and think, okay, if all of this stuff just is gone, what other things could I consider? And I hadn't really had that opportunity in the past few years. And so it was actually exciting to me and very invigorating to have the freedom to say, you can't do any of these things that have been consuming your whole life. What's next? And so we continued to work on building that, and I became partner and the COO of the company. So we opened the cafe space in 2021, adjacent to the barbershop, and built out a brand new roasting facility right next to Dogwood Northeast. And now you can find our coffee in stores like Target across the Midwest, Kowalski's, Alma, J. Selby's, and more. All of these jumps have been big leaps of faith and looking at the patterns of what wasn't working and trying something completely new. And as I look at the path that I've taken, it feels clear to me that every step along the way has been laddering up to where I am now and what I'm trying to do next. So my newest vision is the jump. I'm a big jumpsuit fan, if you and I think there's a big gap in the market for size-inclusive jumpsuits that are sustainably made in the US.
Yes, please.
Oh, I love you guys. So I have about 20 different jumpsuits in my closet, and I could tell you something that's wrong with every single one of them, from sizing issues to fit to just like honestly questionable manufacturing processes. And most brands top out at a size 12 to 14. 68% of women in the US wear above a size 14. Like, what are we even doing? So I think there's this big gap in the market, and I'm excited to launch that. The jump is currently in research and development. I am picking up my first prototype tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. And our goal is to launch next fall, hopefully. We'll see. No, it's going to happen. It's when. It's not if, it's when. So I think about this journey from being a kid who hopped on a plane around the world, to moving to the US, to opening a hyper-local business, to a national coffee brand, to hopefully an international clothing brand. And each of those jumps has been a very calculated risk, one after the next. And it's taken some time to tune into the patterns of where my life was fulfilling me and those things that weren't, and making moves based on where I felt there was the most alignment. So I would challenge each of you to look at the patterns in your life and the patterns that you're stuck with, and think about whether making the jump to the next thing is as scary as staying in the same place. Thank you.